Welcome to Sunday Ripple. I'm Rob Anderson. Each week we explore scripture and the ripples it can create on our everyday lives. Sometimes we're going to reflect on Sunday's message. Sometimes we'll dive into other passages that speak to where we are. Whether you're a Christian or just tuning in for a thoughtful conversation, this podcast is here to help you reflect and grow and keep the message moving through your week. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Sunday Ripple. I'm Rob Anderson. We took a couple of weeks off to chase some salmon and stock the freezer, and also we squeezed in a little family vacation through Montana and Idaho, Washington. I spent some time in Southeast Alaska. It's been a really refreshing break, but I'm glad to be back behind the mic, so let's jump in. What if you were helping a friend put together an IKEA bookshelf? Like not just any bookshelf, but like the kind with 97 wooden dowels and 112 screws, instructions written in a language that resembles hieroglyphics. Now, imagine you've built this exact model before, twice. You know that step 4 should actually come before step 3, or else you end up with something that looks less like a bookshelf and more like a modern art installation. So naturally, you say to your friend, hey, just so you know, it might work better if we... Your friend just simply smiles politely, nods, and completely ignores you. 20 minutes later, you're both staring at a backwards panel that's permanently wedged into place. Screws are missing, the bookshelf's leaning like it just got back from a rough night out. Your friend says, weird, this doesn't look right. What do you do? Do you gloat? Do you wave the instruction manual in their face? Or do you just grab the rubber mallet, swallow your pride, and start quietly disassembling the mess? Sometimes life feels exactly like that hypothetical IKEA moment. You know the right way forward. You can see the mistakes coming. You're not the one in charge, and that can be frustrating. Today, we're talking about the tension of being an advisor instead of a decision maker. How do you offer wisdom and still let go of the outcome? Welcome to Sunday Ripple. A few years ago, I was helping out a local church while they were in between worship leaders. They didn't have a worship pastor, so I stepped in to help with the music and Sunday services and what have you for a while. And then the pandemic hit, and like every other church on the planet, we had to figure out how to get online and fast. So this was a moment where I actually had something useful to offer. See, I'd already been involved in streaming. I had gear, I had software experience, production knowledge, the whole 9 yards. So I stepped up. I said, hey, I'd be happy to help get this set up. I could put together a plan that'll get us a solid live stream with great audio. We'll, however many camera angles we want. We can get lyrics on the screen. We can have something really polished and welcoming for people that are watching from home. And the response was, yeah, we'd like to check in with another church that's been doing some online stuff already. Okay, cool. No problem. I stayed involved, gave some input. And eventually we all met. There was me and a guy from our church and the team from the other church. And I figured I'd just quietly offer my thoughts and let the conversation unfold. But then something kind of funny happened. The other church, who had been live streaming for a while, they listened to my ideas. They looked at the layout I proposed and basically said, yeah, this is actually next level. Like your setup would be better than anything we're currently doing. You'd think that would be the moment where things clicked into place, right? Like, great, let's run with it. No, the church that I was helping never made a decision. No team was organized, no equipment purchased, no plan implemented. In the end, their entire live stream consisted of a smartphone propped up on a music stand, capturing a wide shot of the stage and distant echoey audio and zero interaction. They'd asked for help. I'd offered a complete solution. They acknowledged it was good, and then they just didn't do it. It was one of the most frustrating why even bother moments I've had in ministry. Here's what made it so hard though. I wasn't trying to force my way. I didn't need credit. I just wanted to help them reach people well. But at the end of the day, I wasn't the one in charge. I was just the advisor. And that's the tension we're talking about in this episode. It's that weird middle space where you have deep knowledge about something. You can see the potholes ahead, the better route, the stronger solution, but you don't have the authority to steer the ship. And when people who do have the wheel choose to ignore your input, it stings. It can feel like a waste. It can feel personal even. Sometimes it makes you want to throw your hands up and say, fine, do it your way. Have you ever been there? Have you ever been there? Maybe at work where you have years of experience, but someone fresh out of college gets to make the call, or even at home where you're offering wisdom out of love, but your teenager decides to learn the hard way, or in ministry where your heart is in the right place, but the leadership is hesitant or distracted or just not ready. Being in that position is difficult. And if you're wired like I am, it's especially hard not to internalize it as failure and rejection, or a sign that you should have done more, said it better, or somehow just taken control. But here's the truth. There will be moments in your life where your voice isn't the one that gets listened to. And that doesn't mean you weren't wise. It doesn't mean you failed. It means you were operating as a servant, not a savior. And that's a hard but holy place to be. In this next section, we're going to talk about why it's so hard to let go when we're convinced that we know what's right. And spoiler alert, it has a lot to do with pride, ego, and our need to be respected. But before we get there, take a second to think about this. Have you ever offered your best advice only to have it ignored? What did that stir up in you? Let's dig into that next. So let's be honest. Part of the frustration in situations like this one that I shared isn't just that someone ignored your advice. It's that you were right. You had the experience. You saw the pitfalls. You offered a better way. And they nodded, smiled, and did the exact opposite. And then, surprise, things went sideways. And all you could do was sit there watching it unfold in slow motion, muttering to yourself, this could have been avoided. And underneath that frustration, let's call it what it is. Pride. Not necessarily the chest puffed, look how great I am kind of pride. It's sneakier than that. It's the kind that whispers, I should have been listened to. It's the pride that confuses being wise with needing to be validated. It's the pride that feels personally insulted when your suggestion gets bypassed because whether you realize it or not, you weren't just offering a solution, you were offering a piece of yourself. And when that gets ignored, it stings. We want to be helpful, yes, but we also want to be heard, and we want to be taken seriously. We want our experience to matter. And when it doesn't, well, we start asking questions that feel a little self-righteous. Like, why even ask me if you're not going to take my advice? Or am I wasting my time here? Do they even respect what I bring to the table? Let's pause there for a second, because those are real, valid emotions, but they also reveal something deeper about where we find our worth. See, when you're operating in an advisory role, when you're not the final decision maker, it's easy to let your sense of identity become tethered to whether or not your input is accepted. And that's a dangerous place to live, because in the moment your ideas are passed over, your identity starts to wobble. Suddenly, it's not just about the live stream setup or the project plan or the strategy. It's about you. And now, you're not just disappointed, you're offended. Not just frustrated, but a little bitter. Not just overlooked, but personally wounded. I've been there more times than I care to admit. Sometimes I mask it with a joke like, well, hey, they'll learn eventually. Other times I slip into quiet resentment. Like, why do I even bother? On my worst days, I let it harden me. I disengage. I stop offering my best. And that's exactly what pride does. It puts your value on trial every time you're not applauded. Every time your wisdom isn't used. Every time your suggestion is dismissed. But here's what I'm learning slowly, and with a lot of internal grumbling. Being right doesn't give you the right to be bitter. Let that sink in for a second. You can be absolutely correct, full of wisdom, and still be called to humility. You can be an expert and still be ignored. And that's not a reflection of your value. It's a reflection of the situation, or maybe, just maybe, a divine opportunity to grow in patience and trust. See, Proverbs 12:15 says, "The way of fools seems right to them, but the wise listen to advice." Amen. Preach. But also, can we talk about how hard it is to be the wise one in that verse? The one giving advice that goes unheard, the one watching people choose their own path even though you already know it leads to a dead end. It's hard. And yet over and over in Scripture, we see that wisdom isn't just about what you know, it's about how you carry what you know. James 3:13 says, "Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom." The humility that comes from wisdom, not the ego, not the condescending, "I told you so," not the mic drop moment where you prove you were right all along. No, true wisdom carries itself quietly. It serves without demanding recognition. It advises without manipulation. It offers help even when it's not received. And that's hard. So what do we do with that tension? Well, for starters, we get honest. We admit that part of our frustration isn't just about the outcome. It's about our need to be seen as right. Then we hand that over to Jesus, because let's be real, he knows exactly what it's like to offer perfect wisdom and be completely ignored. And unlike us, he actually is always right. Coming up, we're going to look at how Jesus models surrender, not just in suffering, but in leadership. And we'll talk about how we can trust God's sovereignty when we're not the ones making the call. But for now, let me leave you with this question. When your advice isn't followed, do you take it personally, or can you release it with humility? Let's dig into that a little bit. At some point, if you're going to thrive in situations where your advice isn't followed, you have to come to terms with something both humbling and freeing. God doesn't need you to be in charge in order to work through you. That's hard to accept, especially when you know you could steer things in a better direction. When you've got the skill, the vision, the plan, the checklist, everything lined up, and yet you're still sitting in the passenger seat. It's even harder when the person driving keeps missing the exit. I think about this with my teenagers right now. I've lived more life. I know better. But I have to just sit in the passenger seat and let them miss the exit. And this is where the real spiritual work begins, because this isn't just about live streams or office projects or family decisions. This is about whether you trust God enough to be faithful even when you're not in control. And that brings us to one of the most powerful examples of submission in Scripture, David and Saul. It's in 1 Samuel 24, David has every opportunity to take matters into his own hands. Saul's hunting him down out of jealousy, trying to kill him, and David finds Saul vulnerable in a cave, completely unaware of David's presence. And David's men are ready. They whisper, "This is your chance. God's handed him over. Take him out. Step into leadership already." But David doesn't do it. He cuts off a corner of Saul's robe, then backs off. And afterward, even after that tiny act of defiance, it weighs heavily on him. And why? Because David wasn't just waiting for power. He was waiting for God's timing. He didn't want to be the king who rose to power through control or manipulation. He wanted to trust that if God had truly anointed him, then God would also be the one to open the door. And that takes serious spiritual maturity. And most of us don't start there. Most of us start where I was with that church live stream plan. I know what needs to happen. I've got the solution. Why are we still sitting here doing nothing? But David's posture, it reminds us that sometimes our call isn't to fix the situation, it's to submit in the midst of it. Now, quick clarification, submission doesn't mean silence. It doesn't mean rolling over or abandoning wisdom. David did speak up. He showed Saul the piece of robe he cut, and he said, "I could have taken your life, but I didn't. I'm trusting God to judge between us." Submission isn't passive, it's restrained, it's wise. It's rooted in a deep trust that God is still sovereign, even when people make bad decisions. And that's tough, especially when you're watching the proverbial phone on a music stand live stream go out week after week. It's easy to feel like everything is wasted, like all your insight, all your preparation, all your willingness to serve was pointless. But what if it wasn't? What if your role wasn't to lead the church into a better live stream, but to demonstrate patience, humility, and consistency? What if your faithfulness planted seeds that wouldn't bear fruit until later? What if the point wasn't to make them do it your way, but to reveal God's way through your character? See, Romans 13:1 says, there is no authority except that which God has established. That doesn't mean every leader is godly or that every decision is wise, but it does mean that we can trust God is still at work even when the people in charge miss the mark. And trusting God in those moments doesn't always feel spiritual. Sometimes it feels like quietly adjusting the music stand while biting your tongue. Sometimes it looks like showing up again even when you're frustrated. Sometimes it looks like praying, Lord, help me love these people more than I love being right. And let's be real, nobody's lining up to post that on Instagram. But this is where the rubber meets the road in our spiritual growth, because if we only serve when we're in charge, if we only offer wisdom when it's guaranteed to be followed, if we only stay engaged when we're getting our way, we're not actually following Jesus, we're following influence. Jesus himself modeled this kind of submission. He was the expert. He was the rightful leader. And yet he allowed himself to be misunderstood, ignored, dismissed, and ultimately crucified by the very people he came to save. Why? Because he trusted the Father's plan more than his own desire for immediate results. That's our model. Not a passive resignation, but an active surrender. Not bitter disengagement, but faithful presence. Not silent frustration, but spirit-led restraint. So let me ask you, are you willing to trust God's timing is better than your strategy? Are you willing to keep showing up even when your advice goes unused? Are you willing to be faithful in a support role, knowing your value doesn't come from authority, but from obedience? In this next section, we're going to talk about how to live out that in real life, how to offer wisdom without overstepping, how to stay humble without becoming invisible, how to bless the people in charge, even when they're driving you nuts. Let's keep going. So here you are. You've offered your wisdom, you've prayed, you've submitted, you've waited, and still the live stream is being broadcast from a phone balanced on a slightly wobbly music stand with audio that sounds like it's being transmitted from inside a tin can at the bottom of a well. At this point, you're probably asking, what now? How do I keep helping without losing my mind? Can I duct tape a microphone to the pastor's shirt without being asked to leave the church? It's great. I mean, these are great questions. This is the real world stuff. It's one thing to want to serve humbly. It's another thing entirely to sit through another planning meeting where your suggestions get the old, well, thanks, we'll think about it treatment before being tossed directly into the recycle bin of decisions never made. But here's the thing. You're not powerless. You're not pointless. You're not stuck. You're an advisor. And that role is sacred if you handle it well. So how do we do that? Let me give you a few principles I'm trying to live out imperfectly with much internal sighing. Speak clearly, then stop. Sometimes we keep talking because we think more words equals more impact, but often extra words just sound like nagging. Offer your insight clearly, concisely, and kindly, and then stop. You're not responsible for the outcome, just the offer. Think of yourself as the GPS. You're making the suggestion. In 500 feet, turn left. They go straight instead? Well, that's on them. You don't yank the wheel, you just reroute. Bonus tip here. When people ignore you and hit metaphorical traffic, don't say recalculating in a smug tone. This will not probably go over very well. Number 2 is to know your lane and bless the driver. It's tempting to think like, if I were in charge, this would all run so much smoother. And maybe that's true, but you're not in charge, and God knows that. And your role is to offer value without hijacking the mission. That means you support the person driving, even when they make a few wrong turns. You don't have to agree with every decision, but you can choose to honor them. And let's be honest, you've probably made a few wrong turns in your own life, right? I once used GPS to try to get to a conference, and I ended up at a Taco Bell drive-thru. Not mad about it, but still. All right, number 3 is to play the long game. Influence rarely happens instantly, but it's built slowly over time and through trust. You might not see your advice taken this week, but consistent presence and thoughtful input and gracious responses build up credibility. And one day, maybe months from now, someone might say, hey, remember that thing you suggested a while back? I think we're ready for that now. And you'll be tempted to shout like, I told you. But instead, you'll smile, you'll nod, and you'll say, hey, glad to help, because you're playing the long game. Number 4 is to laugh a little. Can we be honest? Like, sometimes it's just funny. It's funny when a church uses a potato quality live stream and then wonders why no one's watching. It's funny when a decision gets delayed for the 6th time because we just need more input, even though the input is already taped to the whiteboard. It's funny when the only camera shot is half a worship leader's head and the top of a drummer's hair. If you don't find some humor in it, you'll burn out. You'll grow bitter. You'll check out. But if you can chuckle even just a little, you'll stay human. You'll stay tender. You'll stay connected. And besides, God has a sense of humor. I mean, he made ostriches and platypuses and group projects. All right, number 5 is to pray like it matters, because it does. You may not be the one making the decision, but you can always be the one praying behind the scenes. Pray for wisdom for them and for yourself. Pray for unity, not just clarity. Pray that your posture stays humble, even if your ideas are awesome. You never know what God is doing behind the scenes. Maybe the delay isn't rejection, it's preparation. Maybe the thing you're offering won't be accepted now, but God's going to use it in another season. And maybe, just maybe, the real growth is happening in you while you wait. So if you're the person in the room with the ideas that aren't getting traction, if you've got the skill but not the title, if you're the one watching your church, your team, your workplace kind of do what you recommended but not really, take heart. Your voice still matters. You don't have to be loud to be influential. You don't have to be the boss to be a blessing, and you don't have to be in control to be used by God. In this final section, we're going to be zooming out and looking at the bigger picture, like what it means to leave a legacy of influence over time and how God honors faithful advisors. Yes, even the ones who get ignored. So let's finish strong here. I want to take a step back. You offered your input, it got ignored. You wrestled with pride, bit your tongue, kept showing up, blessed the decision makers, and tried to find humor in the whole thing. And now you're wondering, what was the point? Here's the short answer. Faithfulness is always the point. We tend to measure impact in terms of immediate results. Did they take my advice? Did they use my plan? Did the stream quality improve after I spoke up? But God isn't just looking at outcomes. He's looking at character. And over time, that kind of quiet, consistent character builds something far more valuable than a better live stream or a smoother project. It builds trust. And trust, that's what gives your voice weight over the long haul. It's the person who speaks faithfully, gently, and humbly over time that people eventually lean toward when the waters get choppy. Not the loudest voice in the room, not the most forceful, but the one they know has no agenda. It just has wisdom and love and patience. And that's what you're becoming. There's a proverb that I love. It's Proverbs 27:9. It says, perfume and incense bring joy to the heart, and the pleasantness of a friend springs from their heartfelt advice. That's what good counsel feels like. Not controlling, not manipulative. It's pleasant, trustworthy, a breath of fresh air. And when you offer that kind of presence consistently, it leaves a ripple that lasts far beyond one decision. I mean, think about it. Have you ever had someone in your life whose advice stuck with you even when you didn't take it at first? Maybe a teacher, a coach, a parent, a mentor, a pastor. They said something and you brushed it off at the time, but months or even years later, it came back to you just when you needed it. And you realized they were right. That's the long game of godly influence. It doesn't always change the moment, but it shapes the trajectory. And honestly, that's what legacy looks like. Not applause, not credit, but the kind of steady wisdom that keeps echoing in people's hearts long after you've left the room. Now, I know that can sound discouraging in the short term. It feels good to see our impact, right? To know our work mattered, our advice helped, our contribution made something better. And you may have seasons where that's crystal clear, where people do listen, do affirm, and do follow through on what you shared. But there will also be seasons where you're the hidden voice, the behind-the-scenes advisor, the one who faithfully plants seeds you'll never see sprout. And that's okay. In fact, Jesus had a lot to say about the unseen parts of the kingdom. He said it's like yeast working quietly throughout the dough, like a mustard seed, small and easy to overlook, but growing into something far bigger than it seemed at first. That's what your faithfulness looks like too. You might be the mustard seed in the room full of megaphones, but God sees and he honors what's done in humility. So if you're in a season right now where you're offering wisdom no one's using, if you're showing up, offering help, getting brushed off and wondering if it's even worth it, let me remind you, the outcome doesn't define your worth. The obedience does. God didn't call you to be in charge. He called you to be faithful, to speak truth in love, to serve without strings, to model humility and grace, even when no one's clapping, because you never know who's watching. You never know when your steady, humble example might break through the noise. You never know when someone will circle back and say, hey, you've been right all along. Can we start fresh? And in that moment, your legacy won't just be what you said, it'll be how you carried yourself when no one listened. So here's your invitation as we wrap up. Keep showing up. Keep speaking wisely. Keep serving with joy. And trust that the ripples you're making, even when they feel small or unnoticed, are doing something eternal. Because in God's economy, no act of faithful service is ever wasted. Maybe you're the expert, maybe you've got the experience, the insight, the plan all mapped out, but for now your role isn't to lead, it's to advise. And that's not a lesser calling, that's a different kind of faithfulness. Being the voice of wisdom in someone else's story isn't always easy. Sometimes your advice gets ignored, sometimes your ideas get shelved, but none of it is wasted. God is still at work, shaping you, refining your humility, and using your steady presence to influence others in ways you may never fully see. Don't check out. Don't grow bitter. Keep showing up. Keep offering wisdom with grace. Keep trusting God to do what only He can do. Your ripples matter, even if it doesn't make a splash right away. Hey, thanks for listening today, and as always, small ripples can make a big impact. So go make yours. Hey, before you go, I'd really love to hear from you. Whether this episode encouraged you or brought up a question or just made you think, you can actually send a message straight to us. It's an easy way to share your thoughts or your story or even just say hello. Just click the link in the episode description to reach out. I read every message and I'd be honored to hear how God's moving in your life.